Hello, my name is Katie Groves, and this is part 4, final chapter of my story. I've linked parts 1, 2, and 3 below. Please watch those before you watch this, although this might be kind of a standalone piece because it really is going to be just a summary of what I shared so far. So I spoke about the first 17 years of my life, first 18 years really, before waking up, in the early stages of my awakening process, when I got off of drugs and alcohol and I became aware of my thoughts and I started to connect with myself and with the pain and suffering inside. I shared about how I was born into a highly destructive satanic cult that used Monarch mind control to program me from birth, probably from the womb, as some parts of me have informed me. Not that they remember that, but they have that knowledge. And how I was trafficked, how I was sexually abused by both of my parents, used as a sex slave, and forced into snuff films. Like I've said previously, these are terrible things, but I find it important to share about them because other people go through this too. I am not alone. And to those of you who've been through these things, who are hearing this now, who are watching this now, you know that you are not alone. There are other survivors who have spoken out, and I believe that every survivor who speaks out has a unique perspective to offer. I believe that while I am by no means the only person who is speaking out and has spoken out, that I add something new to the tapestry of survivor voices in this world, and that someone will find my unique perspective, that perspective that enables them to break free, just like I have found some unique perspectives that have been the perspectives that have largely enabled me to break free. While I remembered my abuse without hearing about other people's testimonies, in large part, I benefited greatly from looking up other survivors' stories. And so I encourage anyone who watches this to look at other people's stories, to click on other YouTube videos, and to read to read articles. At some point I'm going to post a list of articles and blogs and maybe videos, although I've mostly just explored the articles and the blogs that I found helpful and healing for me. But again, that'll take me some time to compile. I've looked up quite a lot in the time I've been healing, because it is vitally important to not feel alone. And one of the hardest things about being a ritual abuse survivor for me is the fact that by the very nature of what I've been through, by the very nature of having been programmed, it is very dangerous for me to communicate with other survivors, because it is incredibly hard to be fully deprogrammed, to fully break free. And I do not claim perfect freedom. I do not claim with absolute certainty that I'm not still in contact in some way with members of the cult, dissociatively, against my will and my knowledge. And I do not pretend like I have fully freed myself from all of my programming. I still do suffer internal attacks from programs, and I'm still deprogramming myself. And so, like me, most of the survivors I've met, not all of them, have still had programs running and have still been in contact to some degree with the cult that abused them. And as a person who grew up, I consider to kind of be the mother of all cults, at least the ones I'm aware of, it's especially dangerous for me to be in contact with people who've been through this. And so the isolation is really, really painful to bear. And I have had to go to people outside of this world, outside of the world of ritual abuse, and find people who have been through bad enough things that they can understand and they can listen and empathize with the trauma I've experienced to a degree. But have not been through the actual ritual abuse programming that I have been through. And so therefore they're not dangerous to me in that way. I'm sure that people who hear this can relate. And while I do not wish to compare anyone's trauma to each other's, or say that I've been through worse things than people who haven't been ritually abused, I'm sure people do know this is, probably the most extreme stuff that anyone's heard of today, that I know of. And if there are worse things than MK programming, Monarch programming, child trafficking, I've yet to find them. But I will say that out of all the things I've experienced, the worst has been the aloneness, the isolation, and the separation from my own soul and from whatever higher power flows through us all and ties us all together in oneness. Being cut off from that has been the worst experience I've had. Worse than any of the physical torture. Worse than any of the mind games, the traumas, the things I've witnessed. Worse than the pain that those things caused me has been the separation and the isolation from what I call God. So, while it isn't safe for me to have contact with people on the outside, as in, it isn't safe for me to have physical contact with other survivors of ritual abuse, at this time, I'm already finding that just sharing this stuff online is deeply, deeply breaking the isolation that I feel inside. And the sharing that I have done, the relationships I have formed with people outside the cult have been incredibly, incredibly beneficial and incredibly healing. Because ultimately we are all just people. There's no true duality between ritual abuse survivor and not ritual abuse survivor. And in this culture, in American culture, the many cultures all over the world, there is a lot of mind control, brainwashing that goes on. I'm a government mind control survivor. This government governs millions of people. And of course influences everyone in the world, pretty much. So, to say that ritual abuse survivors are the only people who will understand mind control, or the only people who will understand severe abuse is false. And I've found that the more I heal, the more I see that we are all one, that we are all equal. And I think the hardest equality for me to understand is the equality of the people who perpetrated this and the rest of the world. Forgiveness is very hard. Just like trust, forgiveness is very hard to come by for people who tortured and raped and murdered children. But they are human. And unfortunately, that is part of the human experience for some people. And I'll have a lot more to say about that later on. Thank you so much, everyone who has watched this. As I said, I think I've said, don't remember a lot of what I say because of my DID. I hope that I've helped people. And I hope that people who watch this get something out of it. And I hope that the comment section on these videos can be a forum for people to discuss these issues. And I hope that none of it turns into any kind of circus as a result of people who have negative intentions. Thank you. Blessings.